It started with one woman. It extended with hundreds of people, dancing themselves into exhaustion, collapse, and according to some accounts, death. No music, no warning, no explanation that has ever really fully satisfied historians, doctors, or scientists in the 500 years since. They called it the dancing plague. And I want to walk you through what exactly happened, day by day, because the deeper you get into this story, the less it feels like history, and the more it feels like something that could still be waiting, dormant, in the bones of a city somewhere. The city is Strasbourg. In 1518, it isn't a part of France. It's a free imperial city inside the Holy Roman Empire, a dense maze of half timbered houses, narrow cobbled streets, and a cathedral spire that dominates the skyline. It's a city that has already survived famine and is currently living under the weight of a brutal winter followed by crop failures, syphilis outbreaks, and smallpox. People are hungry. People are scared. The air is already thick with the kind of tension that makes a population brittle. And on a narrow street in mid July, a woman steps out of her house. Her name, as far as the records tell us, is Frau Troffea. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't call out to a neighbor or ask for help. She simply begins to dance. There's no music playing, no festival, no reason anyone can identify. She just starts moving, swaying, turning, stepping, right there in the street, alone. At first, this strange, but it's not so alarming yet. Strasbourg has street performers, religious processions, moments of public spectacle. Maybe someone assumes she's celebrating something. Maybe someone assumes she had too much wine. But she doesn't stop. An hour passes, then several. The sun goes down and Frau Troffea is still dancing. The same narrow street, the same jerking, twisting motion. No partner, no rhythm anyone can hear. Her neighbors watch from doorways. Someone tries to talk to her. She doesn't respond. It's as if she can't hear them, as if part of her brain responsible for stopping has simply gone offline. She dances through the night. The next morning, she is still going. Her feet are raw. Her dress is soaked through with sweat. And still, she doesn't stop. By some accounts, she dances continuously for nearly a week before her body finally gives out from exhaustion. If this were the end of the story, it would already be unsettling. A single woman, alone, dancing herself into collapse for reasons no one could explain. But it isn't the end. This is the beginning, because within days, other people start dancing too. By the end of the first week, roughly 3 dozen people have joined Frau Troffea in the streets. They don't know each other. They aren't friends or family. Many of them have never spoken a word to one another before this moment. And yet they're all doing the same thing, dancing uncontrollably for hours at a time, with expressions that witnesses describe as blank, vacant, somewhere else entirely. Think about that for a second. Imagine watching someone you know, a shopkeeper, a baker, the woman who sells bread a street over or something, walk into the road and begin dancing with her eyes wide open, completely unfocused, not laughing, not smiling, just moving over and over like a marionette being worked by something standing just out of sight. Within a month, the numbers climb into the hundreds. Historical accounts vary. Some chroniclers claim as few as 50 were afflicted. Others claim as many as 400 people were dancing in the streets of Strasbourg by August 1518. 400 people. In a city with a population of roughly 20,000. That means at the peak, something close to 1 in every 50 residents of Strasbourg was dancing uncontrollably in public. Unable to stop, and also unable to explain why. And the physical toll was catastrophic. Contemporary accounts describe dancers with bloodied, blistered feet, moving well past the point where the human body should be capable of continuing. People collapsed from heart attacks. People collapsed from strokes. People simply dropped from the pure physical exhaustion, dehydrated, starved, their hearts unable to keep pace with what their bodies were being forced to do. Some chroniclers claim that as many as 15 people were dying per day at the height of the epidemic. 15 deaths a day from dancing. Now, here's a part of the story that adds fire to the flame. It's the response. The local physicians were consulted, and they came to a conclusion that, on paper, sounds almost reasonable for the time. They believed the affliction was caused by hot blood, an imbalance in the body's humors, the medical framework of the era, and their prescribed cure? Let them dance it out. The city authorities, believing the physicians, decided that the best way to treat the epidemic was not to stop the dancing, but to facilitate it. They believed that if the afflicted danced continuously day and night, the fever in their blood would eventually burn itself out. So they built a stage. They cleared out the grain market and the guild hall to make room. They hired musicians, pipers, and drummers to play continuously, believing that rhythm would help guide the mania to its natural, exhausted conclusion. They even hired strong men to physically support the dancers who were on the verge of collapse, so they could keep going without failing. The city of Strasbourg, in an act of what must have felt like practical, evidence based intervention, built infrastructure specifically to enable hundreds of people to dance themselves to death. And it didn't work. It made things worse. Instead of curing the afflicted, the constant music and public spectacle appears to have drawn more people into the mania. Onlookers who came to watch reportedly began to dance themselves. The stage didn't contain the epidemic, it amplified it. Only when city officials reversed the course entirely, banning public dancing, removing the musicians, and instead sending the afflicted to a shrine dedicated to St. Vitus, the patron saint associated with a form of nervous disorder now literally named after him, St. Vitus dance, did the epidemic finally begin to fade. The afflicted were taken to the shrine, given red shoes, and led through a ritual meant to break whatever curse had taken hold of them. By September, roughly 2 months after Frau Troffea first stepped into the street, the dancing stopped, as suddenly and inexplicably as it had begun. The people of Strasbourg didn't actually think this was a disease. Not really, not deep down. Modern accounts like to reach for tidy explanations: bad bread, collective stress. But that's not what the people living through it believed. And if you actually sit with what they believed and why, the whole event starts to look a lot less like a medieval misunderstanding and a lot more like a warning nobody wanted to fully write down. Long before 1518, there was already a deeply rooted regional belief that a saint, Saint Vitus, had the power to curse people into dancing against their will as a divine punishment. This wasn't a fringe superstition, it was doctrine, woven into the religious life of the region. People genuinely believed that if you angered St. Vitus or failed in some spiritual obligation, he could reach down and seize control of your body, forcing your feet to move without your consent, for as long as he chose to let it continue. Which means when Frau Troffea stepped into the street and began to dance with no music and no explanation, the people watching her didn't reach for a medical diagnosis. They reached for the only explanation that made sense to them within their world. Something has taken a hold of her. A curse has landed. And crucially, a curse like that doesn't have to stay contained to one person. It can jump. It can spread from the curse to anyone standing close enough to witness it, as if simply watching opens a door of a sort. That's the part that should unsettle you. The very people who lived through it, who watched their neighbors dance until their feet split open, didn't call it hysteria, they called it possession. Why the town built a stage instead of stopping it. This is the detail that only makes sense once you take the supernatural explanation seriously. If this were simply an illness, why would trained physicians, city officials, and the church itself agree to build a stage, hire musicians, and actively encourage hundreds of people to keep dancing? Because if you believe a curse is what's driving the affliction, the goal isn't to suppress the symptom, it's to let the curse run its course and burn itself out. So, whatever spirit or divine punishment has attached itself to the victim eventually lets go and moves on. The musicians weren't hired to entertain, they were hired to feed the ritual, to help usher the possession towards its end. The same way ritual practices in other traditions use sustained movement or chanting to draw something out of the body rather than fight it directly. It didn't work. If anything, it fed whatever this was. More people fell under it. More people joined the dance floor, drawn in as if the ritual itself was calling them. So, why did the shrine finally work? The dancing didn't stop because doctors intervened. It didn't stop because the fever burned itself out on its own timeline. It stopped only after the afflicted were taken away from the city entirely and brought to a shrine dedicated to St. Vitus himself. Given red shoes, walked through consecrated ground, and put through a specific ritual meant to appease the very saint the townspeople believed had cursed them in the first place. So think about that sequence. Music didn't stop, isolation didn't stop it, medicine didn't stop it. The only thing that ended the epidemic was a religious ritual performed at a holy site specifically designed to lift a curse. If this was purely psychological, it's a strange coincidence that the one intervention which actually worked was the one built entirely around the belief that something supernatural needed to be released. What was actually inside them? There's a detail repeated across multiple surviving chronicles that rarely gets emphasized enough. Witnesses didn't describe the dancers as looking afraid, or exhausted in a normal sense, or even present. They described blank stares, vacant expressions. People moved with a kind of mechanical detachment, as if they weren't occupying their bodies at all, as if something else was simply using them to move. That's not typically how a person in physical distress presents. What witnesses described in Strasbourg sounds closer to something else entirely. The body left running while whatever was supposed to be driving it had been pushed somewhere else. Displaced, locked out, watching from behind its own eyes while something else took the wheel. 500 years of researchers have tried to explain that detail away with fungus and stress. None of them have managed it convincingly. And if you ask the people who actually lived it, the ones who wrote the chronicles, who built the stage, who marched the dancers to the shrine, they never once doubted what they were looking at. They knew exactly what had come to Strasbourg that summer. They just didn't have a way to stop it from happening again. I think the thing that makes the dancing plague genuinely disturbing, more than your average scary story, is that it isn't a story about something coming for you. There's no killer, there's no demon, ghost in the walls. It's a story about your own body turning against your control. About waking up, or not even waking up, just being, inside a version of yourself that no longer listens to you. And the next thing you know, days have passed, and your feet are bleeding through your shoes, and you have no memory of deciding to do any of it. You were there, you were watching, but you weren't driving. But this wasn't the only time in history that this happened. Dancing manias were recorded across medieval Europe for centuries before and after the 1518 outbreak. Outbreaks in Aachen in 1374, and smaller documented cases scattered throughout following decades. Strasbourg is simply the best documented and most extensively chronicled case because by 1518 the city kept detailed civic and medical records. But it wasn't unique. It was apparently something that could occur or recur, a pattern the medieval world encountered again and again without ever understanding it, which raises the question that I think is the real horror underneath all of this. If it happened more than once, under the right combination of fear, famine, and belief, could it happen again? Is there a version of that same psychological pressure sitting somewhere in the world right now, waiting for one person to step outside and start moving for no reason anyone can explain? I want to leave you with one image because I think it's the detail that sticks with people the longest. Picture the Guildhall in Strasbourg, cleared out, converted into a makeshift dance floor on the orders of the city council. Musicians hired specifically for this, torches lit, and inside dozens of people moving without rhythm, without music that marches their own internal compulsion, eyes distant, feet destroyed, bodies running on nothing but whatever is driving them from the inside. Strong men positioned at the edges of the room, not to stop them, but to catch them the moment they start to fall, so they can be propped back up and keep dancing. The city thought they were helping, they thought they were curing an illness. And what they actually built, without realizing it, was a room specifically engineered to keep human beings dancing until their hearts stopped. Now, this is a much more interesting point. This is where you can think perhaps this is a ritual that is occurring, and we don't have the complete details about why it occurred, how it occurred, but we know it was encouraged, right? So Frau Troffea eventually stopped dancing. Some accounts say she was taken to the shrine of St. Vitus and recovered. Others say we simply don't know what became of her at all, that she disappears from the historical record entirely once the chronicles lose interest, her name surviving only as the first thread in a story that's much larger than her. We don't know why she started. We don't know exactly how many people died. We don't know definitively whether it was fungus, fear, or something else. All we know is that for 2 months in the summer of 1518, in a city on the Rhine, hundreds of people danced until their bodies broke, and no one, then or now, has ever been able to fully explain why. If you ever find yourself walking down a quiet street and you feel the sudden, inexplicable urge to move your feet for no reason at all, I'd stop and ask yourself why. Because in Strasbourg, in 1518, nobody did, and some of them never stopped.